Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors regular meeting for Monday, May 12th, 2025. I will call the meeting to order. The first item of business is to review the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 3, discussion and possible action to accept claims dated May 12th, 2025 in the amount of $5,100,337.40.
I'll move the approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just had a question. Kayla, I saw that a good portion of that was the closeout on the island levy project. And is that we still have, it looks like you still have stuff to do on that, still more.
Yeah, it's not
expenditures.
quite closed out yet. There's still a retention held on the second piece of it. So the EDA, the grant portion of it's done, and we're just working on close it out paperwork. But then the other portion's not quite done
Okay.
yet. They're still doing some work there.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 4 will be entering a public hearing on the proposed ordinance for amendments to the Muscatine County construction codes. Eric, do you want to say anything?
Yep, I think I briefed you guys on this. Basically, if you have a local construction code, you must be at least as strict as what the state building codes are, which we have done. But we always, in our local construction code, we listed the various subcodes like the plumbing code, the electric code, the mechanical code, the building and residential codes separately. We're proposing to just adopt by reference the state of Iowa construction codes so that whenever the state updates those codes, we don't have to hold another public hearing to do that. And we've always tried to be consistent. The state's fairly conservative. There are many jurisdictions that jump to the new code immediately. We don't do that. We wait until the state does, then we're mandated to do that. The changes that we would see this year, because the state did just update the state plumbing code, the state mechanical code, and the state electrical code. So plumbing code at the state of Iowa went into effect the end of March, as did the mechanical code, so we would need to update ours anyway. And then the new state electric code, which would be the 2023 NEC, will go into effect on July 1st. So this just makes us consistent with state code minimums and will keep us consistent as they, from time to time, update their codes.
Are there any, in the updates, are there any significant things that you guys saw?
We didn't see anything too significant in the plumbing or mechanical codes. The electric code, I know that you, Jeff, were aware of one of them, that there will be a requirement even for the 30 amp breakers for larger appliances to be GFCI protected.
Is that in the 23
That'll
electric?
be in the 23, yeah. And it does add some costs. I looked at it this morning a little bit. I mean, you can probably on average about $80 difference going from a 30 amp double pole non-GFI to a GFI protected. So if you've got a range stove, a dryer, and maybe even one other large plug-in appliance, there might be $240 additional cost for a new home.
That didn't also, I thought with that also, then they were gonna require, they weren't gonna consider a cord as a disconnect. Is that not in the 23, or is that a other?
That I don't know. We'd have to look into that. If there's something where a disconnect's required, I'm not sure that a cord would qualify as an actual disconnect.
Because I thought there was I'd heard some grumbling about the concern with that, some of those electrical updates, that, the old range cord or dryer cord would no longer be considered a disconnect. You'd have to put some kind of a disconnect in there as well, which I don't know how you'd do that.
I didn't see that in the quick look that I checked, but I'll look into it.
Okay.
And just so everybody's aware, there are certain codes that we can make local amendments to be slightly less strict. Those are really limited to the building codes, not the mechanical, because the state mechanical code, the plumbing code, and electric code are regulated by state agencies like the Department of Public Health and the Fire Marshal's Office, where there's more home rule authority under the building code. So we have some local amendments under our building codes that require less stringent building design. One example is the requirement to sheetrock the ceiling of an unfinished basement space. We're amending that out. It's just something that's kind of ridiculous, that's very burdensome. One of the other amendments that I'm proposing we make this year, it's under our permitting section. A lot of this stuff is just amended to read and then inserting Muscatine County in the name of the authority. We have some amendments on small buildings less than 200 square feet. We don't require a building permit for unless they have electrical or plumbing in them. So like lawn sheds, very small, like stick-built garages for a lawnmower. We don't require building permits if they're less than 200 square feet. One thing this was something that I think Jim recommended some time ago when we talked about withholding building permits for properties that have open violations that have drug on of either building, zoning, or environmental violations, or properties that are delinquent in their property taxes. We felt that was a good enforcement mechanism, so I'm proposing that we have the right to withhold issuance of a building permit if a property has an open violation or is delinquent in their property taxes. We're actually inserting that in writing in our ordinance. So.
It seems like common sense to me.
But it's something that Jim recommended probably should be in writing, so we're putting that in our
Yep.
ordinance. So I think that's about it.
Are you aware of any public comments on this?
I had one email from somebody that saw the notice. They wanted to see the proposed changes, so we sent those to them, and we've got no other feedback. They were just curious what it amounted to, so.
It does not appear there are any members of the public here, but I'm willing to be wrong.
I will note, I do like your adoption of the state codes, because one of the things we heard in the housing council and in building, with builders around, when there's inconsistency in code application from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, it really complicates their life. It's hard for them to do work and plan work when they don't know what one entity's doing, so I think it's a good move.
Okay. Anything else, Eric?
Not over that.
Anybody else have any discussion?
So I will make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Okay, Jeff has
second.
moved and Scott is second. This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. Danny?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
The motion is passed. We are now on to discussion and possible action to approve the ordinance for amendments to Muscatine County construction codes on the first of three readings.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Jeff, a second by Kurt. This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. Danny?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Adopted on the first of three. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action to approve ordinance 05-12-2501, amending the Muscatine County zoning ordinance relating to data centers and cryptocurrency mining on the third and final reading. Anything further on this, Eric?
Nope.
Any discussion? I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve.
I'll second.
Scott has moved, Jeff has seconded. This is a roll call vote. Scott?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I vote aye. Danny?
Aye.
And Kurt?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 6, discussion and possible action to approve an ordinance for special events in Muscatine County on the second of three readings. Any-
One other comment I wanted
Oh, yeah.
to bring to.
And I will say, I got a complaint from someone in the home audience. If we could pull the mic closer, they're having trouble hearing folks at times. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
I hope they can.
We don't know.
The special events ordinance, when I originally drafted it, I included the parks, but I did not include a layer for the Parks Recreation Office to review all of those applications. My sense was, since the park director is actually hired by the
Conservation.
the Conservation Commission, that they really sort of direct and control them. It was my intention that if there are activities that would rise to the level of what we need to do to regulate and assure insurance and waivers, that those would be brought to Eric, and then we would review those to see whether or not we should do anything. They do a lot of little stuff that wouldn't necessarily need to pull itself into that domain, if that makes sense. That was my original thinking. I don't know that I made that clear previously, but I want to make sure as we're going through this that the board agrees and understands, or if the board wants to take a different direction and pull all of those in. You know, I'm thinking about Renton's, Salisbury, Center, those sorts of things are just gonna be minimal. They do allow some diving, scuba diving down at the park. That's one that to me probably ought to be pulled in. We have an insurance certificate, make sure the board's in agreement with letting them use it to do that, and we have waivers. If you wanna do that, Katie had also questioned whether we were gonna allow triathlon folks to train. The state does allow that at some of its locations, but they have to have a boat and a flag and somebody rowing with them and check in with the park. And I'm not sure we have somebody down there at the park all the time, but you know, those are a couple of things swimming around that we need to, you know, I just want the board to be mindful that we could get into the weeds on that end, or we can sort of let the smaller ones be and bring in the ones that are more, I guess, more of an issue of risk.
Yeah, so you're thinking things like we see the Friends of the Barn will do open houses, and like this weekend or next weekend, I think there's a Buckskinner's Rendezvous at Discovery Park, and you'd say those would probably be below the noise level of what this is intended for.
And I
It's
just
really-
think we, you know, if there's questions that Eric can ask, and we can have that conversation between Eric, Kayla and I, or if we need to get direction from the board. From the board's perspective, one thing I wanna make sure is if you wanna allow scuba diving, or if you want to allow training, beyond obviously the area that's designated for swimming at deep lakes, or not. And those are things that I think we need to get some direction on. Are they otherwise likely to happen? And then, of course,
They've currently been doing the training down there?
I don't believe they've been doing the training. It hasn't come up till this triathlon issue came up.
We, actually, in the past, our conservation officers have been pretty tough on even getting out and wading in areas that aren't designated swimming. We've issued tickets. I've had people contact me about that, you know, because the rules are, you know, the only where you're allowed in the water is at the swimming area only. And I think that, you know, because there's a lot of areas on that Deep Lakes Park that there's really no one there.
Yeah.
And if you get people that are swimming and doing things in there, I would have big concern about
Yeah.
that, our liability.
Well, and it's, you know, we can do the waiver and we can, but at the end of the day, you know, if there were to be an incident, everybody'd look at it and go, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
You know it's dangerous, why allow it? You know, the triathlon's one thing, because all the emergency personnel are there, everybody's queued up, or you got people watching, everything it's a coordinated event on a single day. But again, I don't wanna cut Katie out of the conversation. Those were a couple of things that Katie questioned, the scuba diving and the training, that I felt like we needed to make sure you folks understood, so we didn't enact this thing and then have a problem. And if there's thought we need to be more specific about those type of park events that get drug into the special events ordinance, we can certainly do that. But I'm just throwing that out there at this particular juncture. I didn't make it that specific because I wasn't sure that I completely understood all the circumstances at which they allow use of, you know, park property or county property.
Yeah.
The only people that would probably request scuba diving, wouldn't it be the fire department? Are you talking about other organizations?
No, there was two separate groups that had requested permission to scuba dive in areas of deep lakes. One was going to do a lake cleanup, but also make it a scuba club. They were gonna pick up underwater trash and stuff. And the other one was just, I think, wanting to use it to dive as an open water dive experience. So these, I think there'd be more latitude for our public safety people to do training. This is members of the public. What I told Katie with the special event permit is I think we would envision bringing events that allow people to use the park in manners that are not normally allowed, or in areas that are not normally accessible, like swimming outside, not envisioning a special use permit anytime someone rents a park shelter or the lodge at Salisbury, or even has necessarily a Buckskinner event. But if they're using areas that are normally off limits or doing things that are normally not allowed, those would be a special event. That's kind of what Jim and I had talked about.
Yeah, I think that's in line with my thinking, but because I see the issue is, if I'm running along and I see a guy swimming out there with a boat beside him and I think, oh, well, that's okay, it's allowed. And then, you have to make sure they know that that's under special permit, special use. And, I think that's because we have had issues with people, going outside of where they're supposed to down at that park. I know that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure the scuba divers, were they actually from Muscatine County?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, that was another issue to me, it's nothing wrong with certain people using it to do that, if that's what the consensus is, but to me, it's, it ought to be more limited to folks that are residents of the county and have operations here, but not to exclude people, but not to open Pandora's box either.
Well, certainly if we have, like, as a part of the permit, if we have any, emergency response personnel that have to be alerted or involved, then I would want those people to pay for the cost of that.
Absolutely.
Reimburse the county resident for that.
Anyway, just food for thought. I'm okay running with it that way, and unless you have some other directive or just. And again, if Katie wants to speak to it, I didn't intend to exclude her from this conversation. She might have more information that she feels is relevant to the board to consider. So she may want to come next Monday and weigh in on that if she feels.
Well, there's nothing in this ordinance that I read that would, the conservation board still has.
That's part of the reason I left her out, because as we get into these situations where she's really being directed by the conservation board, which meets monthly, and she's not really under the direction of the board, so to speak. And so I thought, well, if we just have her flow through Eric, I don't want to lay another fifth review to it every time somebody files for one. That was kind of my intention, but again, I wanted to make that clear so the board was aware of the other activities and aware of what the thought process was.
Oh, I think that makes sense.
The scuba clubs actually had submitted an application to the conservation board, which they had a special event, application of their own that they've used. But that's kind of what raised my radar, because understanding that's certainly a much higher risk.
Oh, boy.
Type of activity, so the conservation board had to actually approve them. I think in my opinion, that's something that should fall under the special event permit, because we need to look at the insurance, and everybody diving there probably needs to be signing that participant waiver, the whole harmless agreement that we have, including maybe the dive shop that's putting it on. As a diver myself, it's very hard to find places to dive, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
A few people want that liability, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the special events ordinance? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the ordinance for a second reading.
I'll move the approval.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Danny, Jeff moves, Danny seconded. This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
And Kurt?
Aye.
The motion passes on the second reading. Item 7, we're getting a lot of value out of you, Eric. Discussion and possible action to approve an ordinance to amend Title 3, Chapter 2 of the Muscatine County Code of Ordinances relating to the zoning ordinance for private burial sites on the first of 3 readings, and this is being taken back off the table. So this will be the first consideration. Eric, anything to say?
I've had no other comments. I know you guys received an email or two, but hopefully we clarified some of the concerns last semester we talked about. By designating these and allowing them by special use permit, they won't become pioneer cemeteries. The ownership and responsibilities for maintenance will stay with the people that get the special use permit, unless they would transfer them to a subsequent buyer would have to take those over. So I think that was your main concern.
And state law requires that this be allowed in some capacity.
Well, I agree with Jim. I'm not sure that we can just point blank prohibit.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
think
like
so.
a land use, like establishing a convenience store,
Right.
but we can have some
Conditions.
some stipulations there, so we know where they're at. They're recorded forever on the property with a site plan, and so we know who's responsible forever for it.
Well, I think the feedback we got from the public was that they were concerned that they would become pioneer, and Jim says,
Yeah.
if we have this ordinance, that's not a
Yeah,
possibility.
that was my biggest concern, is that they wouldn't end up in the same situation we got, but they won't.
Yeah, the Pioneer Cemetery has a definition in the Iowa code, and it excludes private burial sites.
Okay.
So, what we captured in the ordinance was the ones of which we were aware at the time, so we could designate those, and it didn't include others. We were trying to take care of those that were either pioneer or weren't being looked after, and that's what we listed. So, the board could add one to that, or amend it and add another if that need arose in the future, but I don't envision these as pioneer cemeteries. They're on their own, and they
Okay.
just need to be responsible.
Okay.
So we didn't have any members of the public. I'll move the approval.
Okay. Jeff has moved the approval.
Second.
Kurt has seconded. This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
Motion passes on the first of 3 readings. Item 8. Items with County Development Director Eric Furness. A is discussion and possible action to approve Resolution 05-12-2501, which is approval of the combined preliminary and final plat of Ridgeview Estates subdivision.
If this subdivision looks familiar to you, it should. That's because it was originally approved about a year ago as Curry Acres subdivision. It's a 9-lot residential subdivision that's zoned R2. It's right down by the airport on Highway 61. The owner and developer chose not to move forward with actual development and sale of the lots once that plat was approved. And so he has sold that land to someone else who is actually then just keeping the exact same lot configuration, the single street from the cul-de-sac, and is gonna go forward and sell those lots himself. So the DOT had already approved the entrance onto 61. Nothing else changed, and so the zoning commission recommends approval of this one.
Good. Okay.
And it was never, just to be clear, it was never recorded. It was approved by the Board of Supervisors, the Curry Acres one, so it's not like we have to vacate anything, because it was never actually recorded.
Cool.
So,
So you just stop the process?
yep, just.
Okay, I'll move the approval.
We have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. This is once again a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. Danny?
Aye.
Anchored.
Aye.
It passes. Anything else, Eric?
Just a couple project updates. You saw the insulated panels get delivered to the jail. Hopefully they should be getting started here in the next week or so. We had a pre-construction meeting last week for phase 2 of the admin building with Brian Wolf. They'll be starting here within a week or so, with tuck pointing, masonry repairs, and some painting on the exterior of this building. Hopefully we'll finish resolving the water infiltration issues. We addressed those in phase 1 when we redid the coping and some of the membrane tucking up there. This is now to do where the water damage actually occurred, tuck point and stucco repair. They're gonna do some weekend work, which is gonna be nice. So we're, like, when they need to power wash the building, and hopefully we won't have to shut down any of the lots in the back lot, the handicap lot. It was gonna be an issue with scaffolding or lift over when they're doing their work, so they're gonna do some weekend work that should be minimal disruption to our building function. And I think that's it.
So did you, have, on the jail panel, did we get an actual start date yet, or?
Not an actual date. They took delivery of the product, and they keep telling us it should be within the next week or two, and that was about a week ago, so they're hopefully about ready to mobilize.
I mean, summer's coming and we'd like to
Yeah.
get those panels on, so.
Eric, when I walked by them, go ahead, Danny. I didn't even see.
I was just gonna ask if you had a completion date on the courthouse, if they're.
They're still saying, should be right around the end of this month. They're making really good progress now that they've got all that gutter work, finished or nearly finished. The scaffold's come down, from the clock tower, and so they're applying that slate as the weather allows, and we've had really good working weather, so they're going pretty fast on that. They did the flat roof was completed, I think, last week.
It looked like they flashed their valleys and so
Yeah,
they're probably
working
getting,
on valley flashings and things like that. They've got the 3rd and 4th Street faces of slate, or Mulberry, and this side faces of slate done. They've got primarily slate. They've got a little bit of lower gutter yet to do, where kind of debris's been falling, so they've been kind of saving that. But yeah, they're getting to the point where they're going to be able to just shingle and
that should go it seems to go relatively quickly.
Those gutters, especially when they got in to where they were like hips and valleys in some of the dormers, that there was some intricate work, cutting, bending and soldering those copper liners in there. And as you know, there was some of the wooden support structure underneath had to be replaced in places, so that was very time consuming. But now they should really be moving once those gutters get finished.
Yeah, the gutter system was really craftsman work that they were doing in there. I mean, you look at it, it was like the surface of the moon being that old concrete gutter system. So they've got it all banked and heading the right direction now. And there's just a lot going on there. So that was really the time consuming work.
Well, we hope it gives us another 80 years or 100 years or whatever it gave us, so.
Yep.
We're hoping.
I was gonna mention on the panel project, I walked by there the other day, the fire department uses that alley occasionally, and they had coned off from Cedar Street past the only exit from the sheriff's office parking lot. And so when somebody, because the other end is blocked off, courthouse side is blocked off by the panels. So then somebody has to drive around, well, then they gotta get out, move the cones, and put the cones back. So I stopped at the fire department, and I said, you may wanna think about not blocking that parking lot entrance as long as those panels are here, because those people are gonna have to get out and move them, or whatever you're doing may be a problem. If they try to leave, you know, in your middle of your training, so just, you might wanna be aware that saying something to the fire department might be helpful just to coordinate.
It's ironic, normally people block the fire department.
Yeah, well, they use that alley a lot.
Yeah.
Which is fine, it's just when they coned it off, they do what they normally did, which usually leaves the easterly exit. Well, that's blocked off, so they're only the westerly ones.
Yeah, we went back and forth whether we wanted to stage material there. We knew it was gonna take up some precious real estate, but some of those panels are very long, and it would not have been good to have to transport those across Walnut Street one at a time. And so that really, once they get to putting them on, is gonna be much more efficient.
That's all.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Item number 9 is items with County Engineer Brian Orszowski. Item 9A is discussion and possible action to approve the contract bond and certificate of insurance for Project L M25-2 7370 full depth reclamation and seal coating along portions of Salisbury Road and North Tipton Road. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. So yes, we let this and awarded it, I believe just 2 weeks ago. And the contract bond and insurance all looks good, and contract documents are ready to go. So I'll recommend for approval.
I'll move the approval.
We have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. We've got some utility permits as well.
Yes, we do. We have one utility permit today. It is from Liberty Communications of West Branch, Iowa. Liberty Communications is requesting to install fiber optic cable in the road on 100th Street at house 1352. Pretty straightforward.
Okay.
I'd make the approval.
Second.
Scott has moved, Curtis seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. Anything else, Brian?
I want to give a heads up for something that will probably be on next week's agenda. And I know I spoke about at budget time, the DOT is going to be resurfacing portions of Highway 22 from Lone Tree to east of Nichols. And we are planning to participate at every intersection, paving the returns back roughly 50 feet. A lot of them are at odd angles, and so it might vary from 50 feet, but it's something we've done in the past. It works out real well. One for our guys, it keeps the maintainer from having to get up onto the highway to maintain the gravel, and then also it's a safety thing too. It keeps from having an edge rut along the state highway as well. So, and I believe Johnson County is also going to participate in theirs at Atwood on the county line. They'll do one. We plan to do the other. So last week I got the agreement from the DOT, and hopefully next week we'll be able to bring it down here, look it over, and come to a consensus on it.
You just utilize their contractors, Brian?
Yes.
It's not,
It just goes on their contract. They oversee we'll help out a little bit with the design, just to make sure that we know we're getting what we want. But yeah, it'll be their contractor, their inspectors, it'll be on them. So it's worked out very well in the past. I don't wanna say we come out ahead, but we are getting a very good price. Contractor's already there, already doing similar work, so. So yeah, that'll hopefully be next week. A little bit of project update. Our microsurfacing project, which is North Mulberry and 120th Street, that was supposed to start today, but they had some issues, so they're at least getting pushed back into next week. So hopefully, I think they're hoping to start on the 19th. Our bridge up on 120th Street, those guys are getting really good working days in. The weather's helping them out. They're working on piling today. And then we had Denko in doing our maintenance, crack sealing on our asphalt roads, and they completed their work last Wednesday. So it's going really good. This weather's been really nice for getting work done. That's all I had.
Good deal.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, item 10, discussion and possible action to approve renewal of an Iowa retail cigarette tobacco nicotine vapor permit for Rife Oil Company, doing business as Stewart Road Fast Break at 2418 Stewart Road in Muscatine, Iowa.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 11, discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the May 5th, 2025 regular meeting.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 12, correspondence. Scott?
I had a couple emails. One of them was the information about no cell service out at Salisbury's situation there, which that's just kind of the way that is down in the river bottom. The other, I had a email in regard to this resident had seen some information on the new burn ordinance, and I think like a lot of residents were thinking that there were some major changes and just wasn't sure about what it was, and I sent them a copy of the burn ordinance that we approved, and they responded back that they understood what it was. They were just concerned about they have a small acreage and was concerned about burning some just dead limbs and brush, small amounts of that with maybe some leaves, things like that. And I said, just don't burn it under a burn ban, and keep an eye on it, and should be fine. That's all I have.
Jeff?
Yeah, I did have the conservation, Salisbury Park concern. I sent that to Katie. She did respond to me that they have looked into that. Bill is looking at, what it might take, because they do some events at the lodge. Sometimes it would be, but she said it was in excess of $10,000 to do anything. And so I wouldn't hold a lot of hope that the county will be interested in investing in that. The other thing is I've got an email from the Department of Insurance and AARP on the 29th. They're holding some kind of a event at the Merrill to help seniors with scams or scam avoidance informational seminar, free for anyone that wishes to attend. It's from 8:30 to 10 a.m. on May 29th at the Merrill. So the Department of Insurance and AARP are sponsoring. And that was it.
Okay. I had those same two emails about the scam thing and Salisbury. Danny?
I had Salisbury, and I had a text from a gentleman in Moscow about some dust issues. I forwarded that to Brennan.
I should also mention, I did receive, and I think I mentioned it earlier, I forgot to say it just now, an email from a citizen who wants us to speak up and asked if we would consider saying the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of the meetings. I talked about it, and right now it seems like that's not a direction we want to go with you gentlemen. So I'm sorry, Kurt.
It's all right. I pretty much received everything else.
Cool.
Rest of you did.
How about meetings?
I had none.
Danny?
None.
We had a virtual meeting for the Community Action of Eastern Iowa to seek approval to purchase a vehicle in connection with the Head Start program. Jeff?
On the 7th, I attended the Housing Council meeting here in town. A lot of things going on. You'll see, mostly, everybody sees on 5th, is it 6th Street?
By
5th or
Hy-Vee
6th
there?
Street,
Yeah.
you've got, on 5th Street, I think it is, you've got the MCSA has that, permanent supported housing going in. And then on 6th Street and 7th Street, Community Foundation has some, projects going, so a lot of activity right now. We talked about, different initiatives. I think, something about consistency of building codes and stuff I mentioned earlier, that the city of Muscatine is doing a couple of things, and things are moving.
Awesome. Scott?
The only thing I had was on Thursday the 8th, Riverbend Transit, the Finance Committee met with and had discussion on the budget, and we're still waiting for insurance numbers to come through. So That won't be completed until June, the way it is, but moving forward with that. That's all I have.
Any county employees dying to talk to us?
I did forget one thing, I know I emailed you guys, but just for the public's information.
You want
Yeah, the name of the final bill that passed, escapes me, but I know I notified you guys, the, state passed a bill that would require counties and cities to allow accessory dwelling units
Yeah.
anywhere where there is a single-family dwelling already. I wasn't real thrilled, I was hoping that we could at least maintain some local control on this. It does limit the size of accessory dwelling units to, I think, 1,000 square feet or 50%, up to 50% of what the existing single-family dwelling already is. It would have been my hope we could have written some local regulations that would, maybe require that they be in the side yard or the rear yard space, or that we could, through a special use permit process, evaluate the actual lot or property to make sure that there's adequate room for septic, or emergency vehicle access to these dwellings. We still can, through our wastewater ordinance, they'll have to be able to connect to an approved septic system, so they'll have to figure that out. And because we do have building codes, they'll be subject to the International Residential Code.
What about setbacks and things like that?
The only thing that we can apply is the same setback that the single-family dwelling would be subject to. The only issue I see with that is you could potentially place an accessory dwelling unit in the front yard space of your house. If, say, for example, in an R1 zoning district, the minimum front yard setback is 50 feet. If you have a large lot and your existing dwelling is sitting back at 150 feet, as long as they can meet the minimum of 50, they can put this in the front yard. Homeowners associations with valid and up-to-date covenants are still allowed to restrict these, but the government or the political subdivision cannot.
What's the rationale for this? Do we know?
I can only assume based on who the big proponents of the bill was. It was the Realtor Association and AARP, that it would be
Sure.
to encourage people to take care of aging loved ones, which is a trend that we've been seeing more and more people interested in caring for their aging parents as opposed to care facilities. We've in the past more often seen that in building an addition or a mother-in-law suite. We made some concessions a few years ago to allow a little more freedom to do that within our construction code and our zoning ordinance, but we did not have a provision for building a second dwelling. It is actually prohibited under our current zoning code, so in my email to you, we'll have to make a few little amendments to our zoning ordinance.
But there's no requirement on who can live in it, right?
No, that's the other thing. That was language that was debated through progress of the bill, that there should be a familial tie somewhere,
Who's
but
gonna police
there's
that?
not. And so, it could become a rental.
How would you enforce that?
And that would be difficult to do anyway, but.
Is there anything in the code, the new Iowa code, on the size of the parcel that allows it, or is it any size?
As long as they can meet the minimum setbacks that the
Any
primary structure.
So it would, like a farmstead, so if it was an A1 ag even, that has typically a residence, it would still be allowed there.
If there's a single family dwelling on there, it's allowed.
Cause that's typically, we've had situations where, they wanted to build a new residence, we've allowed that, but then they had to demolish the old. And you're saying into this case, that may not necessarily be may not be able to require that, they may be able to.
Yeah, the only thing that they'll have to apply for is the building permit.
And this can include trailers, it looks like.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
They did allow us, if someone is using a mobile home as the
Yeah,
accessory
attached.
dwelling unit, we can require that it be attached to a permanent foundation and taxed as real property, as real estate.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So, which then, we're waiting to see though, because we ran into some issues with some of these manufactured and mobile homes, where the state stepped in one time and told us that we can't require a foundation system that's inconsistent with the design, the engineered design of a mobile home. So if it's designed to be on just, a set of piers, that we can't require them to set on a basement or a foundation wall. Well, this bill says that we can, so we gotta kind of flesh out how how that's gonna work.
It's, I mean, this requires it to be placed on a permanent foundation, so that's not even our requirement, but what that means is.
Right, well, a permanent foundation could be a set of port piers.
Right.
I mean, that is a foundation system. I'm guessing that we're gonna be able to at least require that, and we won't have to accept a stack of blocks with some ground anchors and straps. You know, that we can require at least a permanent port foundation.
It would have to have its own septic service and electrical service.
Yep.
What about
You can't
well?
tie into
Well-
the other septic on the place.
Well, most septics on the place are not gonna be sized appropriately to take on the additional bedrooms. Residential septic sizing is based on the number of bedrooms, and so unless they constructed their original septic system, you know, 3 bedrooms larger than what was needed, they would have to install a separate.
Can we withhold a permit until they get the septic in order, or to require them?
Well, there won't be any occupancy, because we
grant
can
it,
inspect it, there won't be occupancy
Gotcha,
granted
gotcha,
until it's
gotcha.
approved. A private well can be shared, that's just, there's people that share with a neighbor now.
Yeah.
You can have up to, I believe, 15 connections and still fall under a private well. We've got some subdivisions where they have 3 or 4 wells that, you know, 10, 12 houses share.
Sure.
So the well and septic issue, I'm not too concerned about, other than, you know, the space, which when they come in to apply for their building permit, we require a site plan, so we'll ask those questions, where's,
And this is interesting, it says shall allow a minimum of 1 accessory dwelling unit.
yes.
So, yeah.
So you can, there can be more?
Yes.
Minimum, there's no maximum, so you could,
No,
Oh.
but each one's got.
But that might mean that we could
control
restrict,
that at our level.
we could restrict more than
Right.
1. We could say 1 is all you're gonna get. It's the way I
We
read
can-
that.
yeah, we probably need to take a look at that language. We just
That
got
would
this
be-
last week, and so we're still trying to get our heads around what we can and can't.
Yeah.
Sure.
It is, it's, you know, it's all about this, you know, it's.
We don't want every house.
I
to be
just
able to
need,
trailer
that's
park.
fraught with issues that I can see. We have a couple areas that I think this could be
It-
issues in. Okay.
Yeah.
In that bill, what did it say, it was 1,000 square feet or 1,200?
It says 1,000 or 50% of the residents, whichever is larger.
Then it also says that we can,
Wait,
We
it's
can make our
whichever's
own
larger?
ordinance.
Yeah,
Go
so if you have a
larger.
4,000 square foot house, you can put a 2,000 foot.
Accessory dwelling.
Yeah,
Whoa.
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Well, I gotta
well, we
build
can
me a
make
shed.
we can make our own ordinance to make that resident larger if we wanted, or that. thought
I
that's
don't
how I read
think
it
we
in the bill.
could. It says it shall not exceed, so I don't think we would have that
Right.
discretion.
Okay.
Right, because we can't be less strict than the state code.
But, yeah, this is another blow, by Des Moines against home rule. Yay. Thanks, guys.
This is probably gonna, I think
Change
you'll
it.
probably see a lot of activity on this thing.
I think you'll see significant
Once word
activity.
gets out, yeah, I think
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a boom for some manufactured home salesmen.
Has there been any, conversation with, like the Board of Adjustment that would be asked to grant special use permits in the case of strangely shaped lots? You know, I mean, that, they haven't always really stuck, in my opinion, to that require a hardship. And I don't know if the inability to put an accessory structure would constitute a hardship.
Okay, so you're envisioning, we can't require a special use permit for the accessory dwelling unit, but if they can't meet the minimum
Setbacks.
they're gonna request variances.
Right. No, I'm sorry, not special use, that variance.
I think, you know,
I'm not sure that's a hardship just because.
I don't think it would be very difficult in my mind for it to reach that threshold of.
Hardship is like you don't get economic use out of the
Right,
property.
that you can't get that you're denying them a reasonable expectation of return on their investment. If you have a single family dwelling on there already,
That was your expectation since this law just passed.
yeah, so I guess that remains to be seen, but they'll need to be diligent.
I would certainly appreciate it if they were diligent in that regard.
Yeah. So, I think that's all I had.
Good stuff. Anybody else? All right, any other county employees? Thank you, Eric. Okay, if not, any members of the public wishing to address the board? If not, folks, it's about 9:44 and we are adjourned.